Just at 2265. 2265. Phone.
Hi, this is Angela Garcia. I am a Global resident for over 50 years, and I joined the CAG unofficially last summer and officially in December. Thank you.
Great to have you, Angela. Who's next? Anyone? Just
Gail.
Gail.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Gail. I'm longtime Globeville resident, a member of Globeville First, and happy to join you all tonight.
Good to have you, Gail. Gail works with Globeville First, as does Angela. I think the two of them put it together. Okay, who else have we not heard from? Theron, tell us who you are.
Hello, Theron Makeley. I'm with DSMOG Denver. I work with a bunch of local doctors to fight air pollution on the Front Range, and live pretty close to Globeville, just a little bit south of there, down by the Union Station area, and hoping to help out wherever I can.
Wonderful. Christine O'Connor.
This is Christine O'Connor. I'm a longtime member of the CAG and the CAG's representative to Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation. I'm also the minute taker. I apologize. I was working on something else and forgot to come in. So I do need just to find out who Chris Wardell is with, who Coben is with, and Mark.
Okay. Where is Chris Wardell? Chris, can you?
Yeah, my name is Chris Wardell. I'm with EPA Region 8. I'm the Community Involvement Section Chief. Just listening in, as there's been a lot of discussion with this CAG, so just eager to hear what you all are discussing and looking forward to tonight's presentation. So thank you.
What's your community liaison? I missed that.
I'm the Community Involvement Section Chief for EPA Region 8. So I manage the community involvement coordinators within the region, including, I think, Jennifer Trigo's on here as well. But I've been with EPA for about 11 years, all within the community involvement area, being a community involvement coordinator myself.
Thanks.
So it might be useful if folks that have titles that Christine just asked about, if you put that in the chat, so then she can look at the writing. It might be a little easier for her to get it than to have her to try to hear every single word.
Thank you, Rachel.
Absolutely.
Rachel, thank you. Well, let's hear from Adrian Brown.
Yes, this is Adrian Brown. I'm a groundwater guy. I've been involved off and on with the CAG for some years, and off and on with Superfund sites in this town and around the nation since 1983. And I'm probably one of the few people on the call, other than Chuck, who's read all 192 pages of the report we're going to be discussing later. So I look forward to a spirited discussion.
Thank you very much. Fonda, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Fonda Apostolopoulos. I'm the state project manager for the Vasquez Boulevard Superfund Site. I've been working in the area since 1993. I was involved with the Globeville cleanup also, so I've got a lot of experience in the area.
And Fonda, you're with CDPHE.
Correct.
Right, very good. Let's see, who else have I missed? I've got to go down the list here, right? Angela, Chuck.
Janine.
Janine.
Yep, I'm Janine Natterman. I'm with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment also. I'm a public involvement coordinator and working on numerous Superfund sites in the state.
And Corbin Darling.
Yeah, hi. This is Corbin Darling. Sorry, I'm trying to get my camera going here. There it is. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I am also with EPA Region 8. I'm the Regional Environmental Justice Coordinator, working in our Regional Administrator's Office there. In that role, I work with programs across the region to look for opportunities to integrate environmental justice into their work. And I'm looking forward to the discussion this evening, and invitation.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from Jackie Lansing.
Hi, I'm Jackie Lansing. I live in Park Hill and have an environmental background and am interested in environmental issues that affect Denver.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome. Jennifer Churgo, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Churgo with the Environmental Protection Agency in the Office of Communication and Public Involvement.
And Jesse Aviles, please.
I'm Jesse Aviles. I'm the remedial project manager for the Superfund site.
Thank you. And Jill is here. And Jill, I believe someone's going to introduce you. Well, you can introduce yourself right now. Go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Harrison, and I'm an associate professor of sociology at the University of Colorado, Boulder.
Very good. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself one more time, please?
Yeah, my name is Mark Engerhofer. I'm a resident of Northeast Park Hill that enjoys going along the Sand Creek Trail. And that's why I'm interested in this meeting. I have a background, I have an environmental engineering background and chemistry background. My interest is mostly in environmental remediation. I currently work in the hemp industry. I previously worked for CDPHE several years ago. But yeah, so that's
good.
Why I'm on the call.
And Steve Wharton, will you tell us what part of the EPA you are in?
Sure. I'm Steve Wharton. I'm a first-line supervisor. We call them section chiefs in the Superfund remedial program here in Region 8. And Jesse is in my section, and this site is in my area of responsibility and has been for the 10 years, almost 11 years now that I've been in this position.
Wonderful. And last but not least, I think Yadira Sanchez. Glad to see you here. Would you introduce yourself, Yadira? I don't know if she's going to get turned off. Can you undo your microphone?
Sorry, guys, I had to open up the whole screen and shut down all of the others before I got to you. My name is Yadira Sanchez. I am a resident here of Swansea. I've been living here in Swansea for over, God, I don't know, 18 years probably, or 17 years, something like that. And I participate in GES Coalition amongst other groups here in the community to try to better our environment as much as we can. So I'm here, happy to meet all of you guys and talk to you, all of you guys, and get to hear all the good things that you guys are doing for our community. Thank you.
Welcome. And Bridget, what steps?
Oh, I haven't introduced myself.
I'm sorry, Rachel.
Okay, I'm just the help. It's all good. I'm Rachel Lehman, Associate Professor of Sociology and Women's Studies at the Community College of Denver, and I serve as the Healthy Communities Chair for this CAG. And to that point, if there are community members or anyone who wants to let us know about what's happening in their community or how we can support in community, let me know, because that's my gig. That's what I do. And I currently reside in Montbello.
Very good.
Yep.
Your microphone is a little low, Rachel. I don't know if there's a way to turn it up a bit or not. Okay, Bridget, what is next on our agenda?
So a couple ground rules. Please mute yourself unless you're speaking as we go through our presentations. Please hold questions until the end of the presentation. There will be a Q&A after each presentation. And just an informal, we did publish the minutes of the December meeting in the newsletter. So I assume all CAG members have read it. So we just want to approve the minutes of the December meeting. Are there any dissents? Okay. So
Wait,
next,
I move to approve them. We need to move to approve them.
I second it. So the next thing I thought, just for, especially for newcomers, this is a map of the Superfund site. And within the Superfund site, there's operable unit 1, which EPA recently delisted. And there's operable unit 2, which is basically the outfall and the Coliseum parking lot. And then there's operable unit 3, which is in Globeville, which has a cadmium plume, which is going off-site. Tonight, we're really going to be talking a lot about OU2. And then what is a CAG? A community advisory group is made up of representatives of diverse community interest. It's to serve as an exchange of information between the EPA and other agencies. Its purpose is to provide a public forum for community members to present and discuss their needs and concerns related to the Superfund decision-making process. And a CAG can assist the EPA in making better decisions on how to clean up a site. It offers EPA a unique opportunity to hear and seriously consider community preferences for site cleanup and remediation. The existence of a CAG does not eliminate the need for the EPA also to address the rest of the community. So with that, Rachel, would you like to take over?
So my co-moderator here is Ian Thomas DeFoya, and he's part of the Green Latinos. And we're both, I'm just going to put us in a club together. We're both environmental justice warriors. And I've been anywhere that Ian is, there's some magic that happens. So I'm excited that he's here to help us moderate, to help us get through this information. Ian, you want to take it away?
Well, that made me smile, Rachel. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, that was really, really nice. Can you turn the slide off so that people can see me speaking? Is that possible?
Sure. Yes.
Well, like I said, my name is Ian Thomas DeFoya, and I know that many of you have seen me in different roles over the years in this community. Not only did I grow up in Cole next to this neighborhood, I ran for city council and was the runner-up in 2015. With the Colorado Latino Forum, we've been involved in lawsuits and fighting the city and the Denver School Board for equal rights to air and clean water as everyone else. You know, it was through my work with the Colorado Latino Forum in this community that I made my way to Green Latinos, which is a national environmental justice organization that convenes a broad base of Latino activists and organizers and policy people and fundraising folks. And we were there to fight for our voice and for fight what's fair at the federal Capitol in these rules and regulations. And I can say that in my efforts in Washington, D.C., it is clear that the comprehensive pollution that our communities are experiencing isn't going noticed. We Act for Environmental Justice co-sponsored an event about environmental justice concerns, both air, land, and water. They convene more than 60 partner environmental justice organizations from across the country, and they have a playbook for these kinds of issues. Earth Justice has made commitments to our community in the long term for legal assistance in the battles that we are fighting. And Green Latinos brings its network, which reaches into the halls of Congress and has brought our concerns to the U.S. Natural Resource Committee, where I testified for the Environmental Justice for All Act about many, many things. And I would be glad to come back and talk about the Environmental Justice for All Act, but it is something that we believe can move through this legislature, through this Congress and this new administration. And so I think this and our fight for climate justice are important. What I heard from talking to all the people whom you're about to hear from is that we want solutions now. We want liberation now for our communities. Even when we plant trees, it takes 30 years for us to truly realize some of these gains. And so my community wants to see polluters taken on. We want to see processes happen. If we have the financing for billion-dollar infrastructure, we have the money to solve this for our communities. And I think everything is on the table, including relocation. So if we can move people from the coast because of climate change, can we move communities and keep them intact in ways that is fair to them? Because right now it feels like we're fighting for a little bit while it's killing us slowly. I want to thank you for this opportunity. Dr. Jill Harrison is going to be amazing. She spent a lot of time doing work that directly impacts my community. Not only have I worked in the government, so I understand bureaucracy and how often it is leveraged as a tool for inaction because we can't envision a different future. Now is the time for reimagining police. Now is the time for reimagining our communities. And if our long-term vision is equal access to air and water, then we need to make sure that we can clear every hurdle out of the way, because that's our vision. And Jill Harrison's going to talk about how we can do that and how we can work with people who work in the system. And I think government accountability and whistleblowing is a part of this conversation. I'm hoping that's going to come out in her presentation. And the other thing she worked on was pesticides. And, you know, I don't share this often, but my grandmother on my father's side died of lung cancer. She never smoked in her life, but she worked in the fields, and she believes the pesticides had a terrible impact on her body and on our health and in our communities. And that's why we marched with Cesar Chavez. That's why my family marched with the Brown Berets here in Denver, Colorado, in face of similar circumstances that we are dealing with now, of racism in our face so blatantly and systems that seem tooled against us. So Yadira, I think you're going to go first. I think, Mary, if you'd like to speak now or later, I'd love to hear from you. I didn't get a chance to connect with you. And then Dr. Harrison, I think you should just go right into your presentation.
So I would just like to, for those people who do not know Dr. Harrison, I just would like to just say that she has written a book called From the Inside Out, The Fight for Environmental Justice Within Government Agencies. And it is a book that examines why government agencies allow environmental injustice to persist. So a big welcome to you.
Thank you. Ian, do you want me to start now? Or did you have some other folks who you wanted to speak first?
Yeah, I think Yadira, for sure, we had planned to go next.
Are you ready to go, Yadira? And then Mary, some words from local community, and then we'll have Dr. Harrison come in.
Perfect.
Sound good?
Sounds great.
Thank you. Go dear.
Okay, so hi guys. I'm here as a resident's point of view, and just to kind of talk to you guys a little bit. I'm sorry that I don't have a camera that's functionable right now, so I was able to hurry up and put a picture up there. It's not the best, but hey, what can we do? Just to talk a little bit about, you know, how difficult it has been living in a community that we can afford, but it is very expensive to our own health. So I'm here just to kind of let you guys know, not necessarily just to share a lot of my suffering, but to let you know that we need to be able to stick together, and with people like you all that are here for the CAG, fighting for our community to get better. This is always a plus for everyone. Because if it wasn't for people like the CAG, I don't think we could ever be able to push as hard as we do. So you guys should all pat yourselves on the back for being here, because you guys are all true advocates for our community. And thank you. I want to say thank you again. So it's sad to know that, you know, through being able to afford a place of living can cost you so much in your health. I feel like my life has been robbed from me because I haven't been able to truly be myself, because I haven't been able to commit to a job or an education due to all of the health related issues that we've all endured. Not only myself, but a lot of community people in this community. I've had to spend many days of the week, many hours in National Jewish because of my kids' asthma, allergies, and other health conditions that they have that are not related. Like, I am truly the only one in my household that has asthma, and all of my kids that have asthma. I also do want to say that I'm also the only one that lives in 80216. The majority of my family members live somewhere else. And it has been a struggle. It has been a very large and severe struggle to have to be a single mother and have to go through all of that situation. To know that the EPA wants 4 parts per million and saying that it's okay for that to be able to be in our grounds. But I think that more than anything, sad and disappointed that other organizations can't push so our air quality and water regulations could be moved so that way we could be healthier. It's almost like saying your life doesn't matter, my life doesn't matter, my struggle doesn't matter. None of these people in this neighborhood matter. And it's bad that although all of this contamination in this area is real, people are dying from cancer, people are dying from COPD and so many other diseases in this area that are coming.
Oh dear.
What do you think, Rachel?
I think if we, right now, if we all turn off our cameras, that might help with some issues. And then maybe Yadira would be better, it might give her a little bit more of it. So that might help. Go ahead, Yadira, see if you can't.
I must have gotten disconnected somehow. I don't know if you guys can, are we on and can hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So those are just some of the things that we have gone through. Having to spend the majority of your days in a hospital and not being able to be sufficient as a parent to provide for your own family, it's hard. Not only that, but always being in danger. My kids were never had the opportunity to play sports because I was always afraid. Why is it that something that every child is supposed to go through? You're supposed to be able to play outside, grow, and be yourself, but you can't. My children were never able to play in any sports besides the fact that I didn't have the time. There was too many therapists trying to come over here. A lot of therapists which would cancel because they just didn't want to come to this area. Most of them were not even aware that this little area existed. And that saddens me because I've spent the majority of my life trying to make sure that my kids stay healthy. And I feel like if all of these contaminants are here and these big companies that are here to protect us, why can't they do something? Why can't they fight stronger? Thank you.
Thank you, Yadira. Your mama bear is totally coming out, like it's roaring right now, and I am all here for it. Thank you so much. Just such an inspiration. Mary, do you want to share a few words with us today?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, I didn't know exactly what I was supposed to say, but I just listening to Yadira, all the things that I've gone through for generations, living in the area, and then now joining this advocacy group. I've learned so much, and I've researched so much, and I found out in the time that I spent why we have suffered for so long, and in my family for generations, and we still continue to suffer. And it seems like anymore it's a daily thing, and I just feel so saddened for the people that have to live there and have to deal with this new I-70 and the digging and the whole thing there with the Swansea Elementary. And I've just come to find out that, politicians don't really care. I mean, we've had so many meetings with politicians and their promises and things they're going to do for us, and nothing happens. And newspapers and reporters and people that I've talked to for these years, and nothing's happened. And I just my heart hurts for the people there, and it bothers me so much that sometimes I just have to pull away for a minute. And I just took my daughter home. She thought she was having a heart attack on the way home. We got so many health issues and so much time spent in hospitals that it's just really hard anymore. And I just wish help and hope for the people that are in the neighborhood there. And that's all I really want to say right now.
We appreciate you. Mary has been a long time advocate with a very strong voice, and her family has suffered innumerable kinds of effects from the environment in this area. I appreciate that. Ian?
I too want to acknowledge what Mary and Yadira both said. And it reminds me that this is generational. This is a perfect time to acknowledge this is occupied Cheyenne Ute and Arapaho land, and that they do not even have, the Cheyenne Arapaho have a reservation or their own space here. They're in Oklahoma and in Wyoming, and they are about to rename Mount Evans, hopefully, to Mount Blue Sky. If you're not aware of that, I hope that you can come out and support that. Again, like this is generational, what we are feeling. Even these industries date back to that exploitive time, some of them nearly 100 years. This is a legacy pollution, and it is impacting our communities. And so I just really want to hold space for the fact that, like, I feel like this is a fight that my family has been having for a very long time, and so do their families.
Jill?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mary and Yadira, especially for your comments. I appreciate that you all asked them to speak for a few minutes before me. I think this is important. I mean, I'm going to share with you the findings from my research, but my research is driven by my conviction and my commitment to doing right by communities that are overburdened with environmental hazards and underrepresented and underprotected by the government. And I think sometimes in my own work, the conversations around this can get abstract and academic. And so I just so appreciate your candid and frank comments about how living in a contaminated community and being promised change for so long and not seeing it, how much of a burden that is in so many ways. So, so yeah, my name's Jill Harrison. I'm a associate professor of sociology at the University of Colorado, Boulder. And what that means, so the job that I have entails doing research. It also entails teaching, and it also entails doing service work within my department and within the university and within the community more broadly. So I wear a lot of different hats and do a lot of different things. Bridget and Ian asked me to come speak about my research on environmental justice, and I thought I would tell you about my latest book, which recently came out. And when Ian and I talked yesterday, he asked me to share with you a few more details, kind of to put that into context. So I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about who I am and where I'm from and some of the different work that I've done. And then Ian will ask me some questions, I think is the plan, and then we can open it up for Q&A. So I'm from California, and I grew up in Southern California in San Diego. And I was interested in issues of social justice and environment for a long time. My parents instilled in us in particular a real concern for migrants from Mexico who had passed through our town that I lived in, working in the agricultural fields, and who also many of them lived in the canyons, kind of that divided some of the residential neighborhoods where I'm from. And so they got me interested in kind of thinking about how issues of social inequality related to land use and different kinds of agricultural practices in particular. And I ended up really kind of taking those concerns seriously in graduate school. I mean, I took them seriously before that too, but in graduate school, when I was a PhD student at the University of California, Santa Cruz, I did my dissertation research on political conflict over agricultural pesticide drift in California. And I focused on, so pesticide drift is when pesticides move off-site from where they're applied and into other kinds of spaces, including spaces where people are playing or working or walking or talking or otherwise living their lives. And so that project ended up becoming a project in which I looked at this disagreement between politically active community residents, many of whom had seen firsthand extensive pesticide drift and come to see it and know it as a part of their everyday lives. And also, so I looked at and kind of examined their stories and collected their stories, put those into conversation with data from a wide range of other scientific disciplines, including epidemiology, as well as air monitoring studies and water monitoring studies and everything else in between, in order to paint a picture of just how widespread and serious the problem of pesticide drift is in pesticide intensive agricultural areas. And then I contrasted that with the story that regulatory agencies would tell about pesticide drift, which is that it's an unfortunate problem, but ultimately a very rare one. And I used my extensive interviews with community members and also observations of activist events in order to really challenge the dominant story that pesticide regulatory agencies in California, but also elsewhere in the United States, were telling, and to call for stronger regulations on agricultural pesticides in order to protect the health of people living in agricultural communities. And a big theme in that project was really a kind of, and my main concern was with showing how poverty, legal status issues, reliance on the agricultural industry for jobs, and other forms of vulnerability end up compounding the problems for people living in agricultural communities. That in order to address problems like pesticide drift, we have to understand that so much of that problem is rendered invisible by the kind of very forms of social vulnerability that make people more likely to be exposed, less likely to be taken seriously, less likely to be able to get help from the legal system and from the medical system. One of the kind of the things, though, that I heard from pesticide regulatory officials who I also interviewed extensively for that research was that for a lot of them, they would tell me, okay, we understand, and this was, to varying degrees, they understood the very strident criticism that they were receiving from community members. And those who, even those, some felt kind of more or less sympathetic with that. But some of them would say, okay, so there's this, critiques of pesticide regulation, but just so you know, there's work that we're doing here internally within California EPA around environmental justice in general. There's all these, and this was in like the early 2000s, and California EPA had some kind of nascent efforts to try to revise regulatory practice in line with environmental justice principles. And I didn't have time to focus on that for my dissertation, but I decided to come back to it when I moved here to Colorado 10 years ago. And it was time for me to start a new research project. And so I decided to take that invitation, as it were, seriously, and to look at what are government agencies doing in the name of environmental justice. Agencies have been trying to reform regulatory practice to varying degrees for a couple of decades now. Felt like time to take stock, to say, okay, what have agencies done? What are their environmental justice policies, programs, and other kinds of efforts look like? What do they entail? How well do those match the demands of environmental justice activists who fought for those reforms? And most importantly, what explains why agencies' environmental justice efforts fall short of what environmental justice activists have called for? So it's one thing to kind of call agencies to task for not doing as much as we would want. It's another thing, and part of my job as a social scientist, to explain why is it that things look the way they do. So for this latest project, it involved extensive confidential interviews with government agency staff. So interviews with agency representatives from U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I interviewed staff at nearly all of the regional offices, as well as several other kind of satellite offices of US EPA, as well as many staff at US EPA headquarters. I've also interviewed and observed staff at a number of different state level environmental regulatory agencies, including Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, as well as agencies in California, Minneapolis, and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, New York, and several other states in the United States. And the staff who I interviewed and observed, some of them are who I call environmental justice staff. So these are folks who are formally tasked with kind of leading the design and implementation of environmental justice reforms within their agencies. And some of the other staff who I interviewed and observed were, just for lack of a better term, I call other staff. So these are folks who are not formally tasked with doing environmental justice reform work. Some of them are very interested in it and support it. Some of them are kind of ambivalent about it. And then some of the others who I interviewed are pretty stridently hostile to the notion of environmental justice reforms within their agencies. And so what I've done in this book that came out about a year ago was to kind of the main finding that became very clear to me through interviewing and observing these staff, a couple of main findings. One is one that other scholars have certainly shown in other cases, and I found it as well, which is that government agency staff, in trying to roll out environmental justice reforms to the ways that they do rulemaking, permitting, enforcement work, that these kinds of efforts are really stymied by rollbacks of regulatory authority, restrictions on the amount of resources that they have, these other kinds of things that are really out of their control and largely imposed upon them, often by anti-regulatory elites. I can say that now because we're in the last day of the Trump administration, so it's okay to say these things out loud. And at the same time, another finding that came through loud and clear through my interviews with agency staff, especially those who are really trying to kind of fight for environmental justice reforms within their agencies, is that they face a lot of resistance from their own colleagues, from some of their own colleagues. So, and this is, I mean, I think this is something that I want to bring to you, and I have some thoughts about, some ideas about kind of what you can take away from this. But just to elaborate a little bit more, there's, I think that kind of the main finding to take away here is that when you open up this black box of environmental regulatory agencies, the people who work within them, by and large, and this is something that other scholarship has shown as well, that by and large, environmental regulatory agency staff feel very committed to their work. They are very committed to environmental regulation. They're very committed to doing good work and to being public servants. The problem is that they don't necessarily see environmental justice as consistent with their idea of what it means to do good work. And so some takeaway points that I thought kind of might be helpful just to put on the table, and we can talk about them, or we can talk about other issues that I've mentioned that you want to hear more about. One is that, in addition to, so key findings, one, government agency staff care about doing good work and good environmental regulation. Two, they don't necessarily see environmental justice as consistent with what it means to do good work. That's something that needs to change. And that's something that I'm in conversation with environmental regulatory agency staff about working on. And that's something that EJ staff in regulatory agencies are already trying to work on and have been trying to work on for some time. A third point, the environmental justice movements and environmental justice organizations have long used a combination of confrontational tactics and tactics that are also collaborative, kind of in a more collaborative fashion with government agencies. And those are both important. Those are kind of key parts of what makes the environmental justice movement so important and has enabled it to gain traction in different ways over time. So I'm going to be recommending some more kind of tips along the collaborative line, but that's not to say that I would dismiss the value of confrontational tactics too. Another point kind of to take away from this is that you have allies within environmental regulatory agencies. There are EJ supportive staff within them inside the government. These are growing in number. Some of that is because new staff are moving in, folks who are coming from backgrounds where they've experienced environmental contamination, or maybe they've had training in environmental justice in college. But staff who are sympathetic to the principles of environmental justice are also growing in number because bureaucrats can change their minds. I've talked with many staff within government agencies who they themselves or folks they know have changed their minds, have become moved by hearing the stories of community members who are outraged about the hazards that they face and that they've been continuing to face, and that they feel moved and changed by hearing those stories. Some of the things that regulatory agency staff members' minds have been changed about, they talk about coming to realize that the severity of environmental problems is more serious than they understood before. They come to understand the cumulative nature of many different kinds of environmental hazards, how those build upon each other, and deeply affect the lives of people in these communities. They also talk about how they've come to understand the importance and legitimacy of community-generated data. So these are just a couple of examples of ways that staff within these agencies have come to see their work in different ways and have come to see community activists in different ways. So I guess one of my recommendations to you, and you don't need to hear this from me, but I'm going to say it anyway, is to keep pushing, that you are changing hearts and minds through your work, and that this can be especially effective as you treat the staff of environmental regulatory agencies as humans, as connect with them along that understanding that they care about doing good work. It's just that they need to redefine what it means to do good work. And there are lots of ways in which staff within these agencies are working to change the ways that their agencies regulate environmental problems. They have all kinds of tactics. Environmental justice staff use all kinds of different techniques for trying to change the ways that their agencies work. For example, many have talked with me about how back in the day when we could all see each other in person in real settings, they would bring community members in to talk with their peers and their colleagues, or that they would take their colleagues out into communities in order to kind of get a better understanding of what life is like in overburdened and vulnerable communities. They talk about educating their peers, and they spend a lot of time educating their peers, their colleagues, about what environmental justice means and requires. They spend extensive amounts of time working on trying to create innovative programs within their agencies. And we can talk about what some of those might look like. Some of the environmental justice supportive staff who I've talked to at different agencies talk about how they use their connections with community members to inform community members about upcoming regulatory decisions and feed information to them, public information to them, so that community members can kind of speak precisely to the decisions that are being made at those upcoming decision-making opportunities. They talk about working environmental justice principles into agency grant program criteria so that more grant funding from these agencies can go to addressing the issues that community members are most concerned about. They talk about finding new pots of money that they can then channel into those grant programs that explicitly support environmental justice, community-based organizations. So a lot of this stuff is behind the scenes. Other behind the scenes things that EJ supportive staff are doing is that they're working to integrate, and this is probably the most important thing, they're working to try to integrate environmental justice analysis into core regulatory decision-making, like into the permit review process, into rule writing, into other key regulatory decisions. This is hotly contested, difficult work, and it's also arguably the most important work that agencies have to be doing. And then one last point that I'll make is that kind of about some of the important work that EJ supportive staff are trying to do in their jobs is that they are working to identify areas where existing rules about how regulatory work gets done should be reinterpreted so that regulatory practice gets done differently. This requires often a reinterpretation of existing statute, which can happen. EJ supportive staff also identify ways where existing rules need to be revised. And they also play a really important role in identifying where new legislation is needed. So these staff who are on the inside and supportive of environmental justice play these crucial roles in all of these different kinds of ways, including figuring out kind of the creative tweaks that need to happen so that their colleagues who want to follow the rules, who want to do good work, can follow a different set of guidelines about how to do their jobs so that these agencies' practice better serves the most important goal, which is reducing hazards in the communities that are overburdened and vulnerable to the effects of that exposure. Okay, so that was a lot. I think I'll pause there, and I'm happy to take questions and to chat with any of you, including Ian.
Hey, Rachel, you're there too.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have any burning questions, Rachel? I'll let you go first.
Oh, okay. I want to just, one sociologist to another, say thank you for this. What I've been really struggling with, and I think what a lot of these governmental agencies struggle with, especially ones that are steeped in science, is that they leave out the people, and they leave out how do those policies act. If you're going to write a policy, it can only be effective if it is integrated into the community in a culturally relevant way, or it is done in a way that people understand. And people don't often operate on a timeline in the way that you might think that they do. And so I really do appreciate how you took this approach of like, hey, let's look inside there, and let's look and see what's going on inside the agency, and be very much like an organizational sort of snapshot. So I appreciate that. I also wonder, when you were doing your data, when you were doing your research, what was some of the demographics that you were dealing with? What was did you disaggregate sort of the racial components, the gender components, nationality, those kinds of things as you were doing these interviews, and maybe make some comments about how that maybe informed what they were thinking and how they were acting within the agency?
Yeah, definitely. So I sought to interview a real diversity of staff within these agencies, and most environmental regulatory agency staff are kind of the predominantly white, college educated, have degrees in engineering, sciences, or law. And when it comes to environmental justice staff, so the folks who have been kind of formally assigned to doing environmental justice work, most of them are persons of color. And so there's a real difference there along racial lines. And I think there's good reasons for hiring people of color within these agencies into these positions to help inform that work, or to, at least be a part of those teams. One of the things that came through in my interviews with EJ supportive staff is that a lot of the environmental justice, staff of color who I interviewed within these agencies spoke quite frankly about racist treatment that they'd experienced within their institutions, within their organizations, and in ways that I think are probably pretty consistent with a lot of the workplaces that a lot of us work in. I can certainly say the same thing. I've heard very similar things from my own colleagues of color at the University of Colorado. So that, this isn't, that kind of element is part of life in the United States today. Unfortunately, I don't think it's, limited to environmental regulatory agencies. But the reason it's relevant is that you have these staff where staff of color are being asked to do this work around kind of getting their agencies to pay more attention in particular to racial environmental inequalities and receiving pushback for that work. And it dovetails with pushback that they receive in many other kind of aspects of their work by virtue of being persons of color in a white kind of organizational environment, where talking about, and so when I talk about the resistance that staff, EJ supportive staff face to their environmental justice reform efforts, this is resistance that I witnessed myself and was told about from other people. And a lot of the resistance really pivoted around kind of the fact that a lot of environmental justice reforms or proposed environmental justice reforms are trying to are focused on getting the agencies to address racial environmental inequalities in particular. There are other forms of environmental inequalities or environmental injustice that are important, but the kind of bringing race into the conversation ends up being a really hot button topic in these organizations where staff are accustomed to thinking about a good way of doing their work is to do so in a colorblind fashion. So, and this again is something that's not limited to environmental regulatory agencies, but is part of life in the United States today, where so many of us have been taught that the way to be non-racist is to not talk about race, to not look at race, to not see race, to kind of not call out racial difference. And so when environmental justice supportive staff are saying we need to acknowledge as an organization the ways in which doing our work, even with the best of intentions and with kind of working overtime and however kind of committed we are to doing our work, this institution is still allowing racial environmental inequalities to persist. And calling out kind of the racist outcomes of the institution and asking staff to identify those racial inequalities and to figure out ways of doing their work differently in order to try to redress them was a very difficult pill for many staff, white staff, to swallow, that it offended their sense of what it means to be objective and neutral and unbiased towards communities. So that conversation around, what does it mean to be anti-racist? What does it mean to try to break down the systems of racism? That's a conversation that many of us are having within our organizational workplaces, and it's something that has to happen within EPA in addition. So yes, Rachel, I mean, there's some real difference there among staff in terms of kind of how they understand the importance of these issues, but also how they're, staff would say things to me like, it's easier for me as a white EJ staff person to bring this up than it is for my colleague of color to bring it up, because some of the staff would kind of bristle when the African-American EJ staff person would say, we need to pay more attention to, the environmental justice issues plaguing Black communities in our state or in our region. That was often kind of seen as and called out as something that person was doing in order to try to kind of protect resources for their community. So I'm not explaining this very well. I certainly detail it in a much better fashion in the book. And I also need to go open my door really quickly. My dog is pawing at it and it's driving me crazy.
Yes.
So.
Could I just add something to what Jill said? And that is that my experience of growing up on this side of North Denver in Berkeley Park, now Regis, there was a benign neglect to use the words of Daniel Patrick Moynihan, those terrible words that the administrations statewide and citywide treated these north neighborhoods. And it not only went through Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, it went all the way through Little Italy, which is old District 9 or District 10, and it went into the northwest corner of Denver. And I noticed that the city treated Globeville, Elyria, Swansea differently than other parts of town. For example, you look at how late it took for street sidewalks. For sidewalks in Globeville were just a few years back. and they didn't care about the alleys, but in a way, the older Slavic people who lived in Globeville area, Swansea, were resentful of the city and didn't want them around because they didn't want to be told that their tailings that were used to fill in their yards might have pollution in them. They were offended that anybody would say that their part of town wasn't any better because every lawn that you looked at looked like it was manicured by the golf staff at Case Golf Course. I mean, these people had competitions in their neighborhood about it. And the way the city paid them off was to always have one or two people in the Parks Department or in the city water department or something that would compensate for the lack of attention that the city gave these neighborhoods. And that's what always appalled me when we were trying to get the sound barriers along I-70 up in North Denver. They were flimsy, and they still are, flimsy little wooden barriers. You go out into the Republic in Jefferson County, they've got huge, massive walls that look like the people that built the China Wall might have manufactured them. And so it's this double standard of treating this part of town differently from the way they would have treated Cherry Hills Village or whatever those neighborhoods are called out there. They would never think of putting a medical waste burning site in, and they would have gotten their sidewalks and parks and everything. So this is I'm so glad you did the research to prove what I experienced just watching how the city, the state dealt with us in trying to deal with these neighborhoods. And I mean, I was coming into these neighborhoods since I was in grade school. Holy Rosary Slovenian Church had a Slovenian class, so I attended that Slovenian class when I was in high school, and that's how I got interested in Russian and my further interest in Latin and Greek. I taught Latin and Greek at Regis for 20 years. I still love languages. That's how I'm getting through the coronavirus, is to just reread all my Greek and Latin classics. But I got to tell you that there is a great deal of truth in what you're saying about the way the city and the state treats this part of town with benign neglect. So I just want to be a little exclamation point, Jill, for what you said, just by way of historic witness. That's why I think this group is so valuable. I've got a book here by Marshall McLuhan, The Understanding Media. The medium is the message. This little group does more. Every now and again, I see Bridget has put something out on water. The next thing I know, the Denver Water Department is doing exactly what she suggested. So this group has more sway than it tells. And also, Bridget, you forgot to call for a vote on the, you said everybody interested in voting on the minutes, but you didn't have a vote. So sometime during the meeting, you should have a vote. Just want to keep us clean technologically.
Thank you, parliamentarian.
Following Thomas Jefferson's manual of performance. Just a joy to be with you and hear from some of the others.
Excellent. Ian?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks again for your study about the pesticides. When we talk about migrant farmers, I think it means a whole lot of different things for different people. My ancestors are Oke Winge and Dinde from the headwaters of the Rio Grande. So they farmed in the same community they always farmed in, except the system took them from being farmers to farm workers and then poison farmed workers. And even more recently, the Latino Forum has testified, and they are still not guaranteed the same kind of breaks that the rest of us are guaranteed, in particular, those that are on HB2 visas. And so I just, I just felt making that point. I don't know why I wrote that down, but I just want to appreciate you for that work. And then, I hear what you're saying about that there are people inside that are helping us. And I do see them that funnel information to us or try to help us. And I just want to remind them that, whistleblowing exists. and that there's opportunities for them to unite with the community, to do the right thing, to voice concerns when you see it, and to not just always go through their internal process, but to come public with things so that we can support you. Because sometimes when you're isolated inside an agency and we have no idea that it's happening in the community, we have no way of showing up for you or of advocating for you or using our elected officials to advocate for you, whom are making it very clear that these are problems in our community. I posted in here about whistleblowing. You know, I'm curious if you had any information about people whom are from agencies that maybe we don't typically think of. So for example, we have a gentleman, Margaret here, who worked on marijuana and marijuana regulations, and how they're doing intensive studies down to the parts per billion for toxicity in plants that all of us are generally consuming. Yes, it's new technology, but here's something that's long-standing, and you would think it would be at the front of the line for funding to do the research. And you know, whether you're seeing, I guess what I'm really asking is, are we seeing other agencies seeing themselves in environmental justice in which they didn't see themselves before, because it's so cross-pollinating?
Definitely. And there's some areas in the country where this is more kind of sophisticated and elaborate than others. So, I mean, when I speak with staff at California Environmental Protection Agency, who really are kind of on the cutting edge of state environmental regulatory agencies, they're doing a lot of pretty innovative things, in part because they have this supportive legislature that passes environmental justice laws that kind of pushes the agencies and compels the agencies to make certain changes to regulatory practice. So really kind of that stick that then environmental justice staff within their agencies can kind of rest on in order to convince their colleagues to get further on board. But when you talk with folks at California EPA, they are in conversation with staff at other agencies in pretty much every aspect of government, even ones that you would not necessarily think of, like the Department of Transportation. So, and now is really the time. There's, you know, especially in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protests, it's just become so incredibly imperative that government agencies have a responsibility, and other public institutions like universities and private institutions as well have a responsibility to change the ways that they do their work. That the status quo of everyone coming in and doing a good job and giving it their best and not paying attention to the racial inequalities that their organization is unwittingly perpetuating, that time is gone. That government agencies, other public agencies and private agencies have a responsibility to figure out how is it that we can do our work differently in order to produce different kinds of outcomes. And so, Ian, I appreciate your point here in the sidebar about whistleblowing, but I think part of the message that I would want to send too is that some of the kind of crucial and overarching ways in which an institution like the EPA or CDPHE contributes to environmental injustice is not, I mean, to some extent that's happening, those outcomes, those institutions contribute to those problematic outcomes because there are people within them who need to be called out for not doing their jobs right. But another way to look at it is that at the same time, these organizations are doing work that ignores and therefore perpetuates environmental injustice precisely because people within them are following the rules, are doing their jobs well as best they can, bring the best of intentions to their jobs, but the rules are not designed to reduce environmental injustice and environmental inequalities. So I think we have to hold kind of both of those things at the same time. That yes, there's undoubtedly whistleblowing that needs to happen. And at the same time, these agencies are staffed full of people who are trying to do good work. It's just that the rules that they're implementing were not designed to reduce environmental injustice. And that's part of what needs to change.
And if I can just add another footnote, the neglect is bipartisan. It's the only thing that you could find that's bipartisan. Both Republican and Democratic administrations have treated everybody like crap for so long you can't tell the difference. Remember, it was this guy Fox, who was Barack Obama's transportation secretary, who on the very final day that Barack Obama was in, said, go ahead with the I-70 fiasco project. And so tell me about how important it is to have Democrats in office when whenever we have Democrats in office, they lay down and fall in obsequiousness to the mayor and city council and don't do a damn thing to protect these neighborhoods except for nice platitudes about, oh, we've got to do something about it. So that's just an added footnote I hope you could put in your book, Jill.
I mean, it's interesting you bring that up because the issue of political administration is an important one, and I would say it's a multifaceted one. On the one hand, the environmental justice supportive staff who I interviewed at every agency that I studied, all of them said that the resistance that they face from coworkers who say those reforms that you're advocating are inconsistent with the mission of this agency and inconsistent with what I should be doing, that pushback, that resistance that they got from their peers, that they continue to get from their peers, is unchanged by political administration.
Yeah.
That they experience that same kind of resistance under Democratic administrations as much as Republican ones. Now, that said, Democratic administrations, especially the Obama administration at the federal level, made important advancements for environmental justice that have been unparalleled, and that having executive level leadership that actively supports environmental justice, that puts EJ supportive political appointees into place, that channels more money into this kind of work, that upholds existing regulatory authority rather than rolling it back. All of these things also do matter at the same time. So, I mean, the resistance itself internally, that kind of cultural pushback against EJ within agencies, is maintained across political administrations, because that's resistance that's coming from career staff who by and large have worked in their agencies for decades. But at the same time, the changes in political administration deeply affect the kind of funding, regulatory authority, and other factors that very much shape the ways that staff are able to do their work. So I wouldn't say that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't affect everything.
And
Thank
I would
you.
just
Can
add
we,
the only time the city.
Dennis, can we please, I'm gonna pause real quickly. I thank you so much for your contributions. I want to give the community members that are
Okay.
directly
Yeah,
affected.
you've got my view.
Yeah, of course, we know, we love it. And we just want to give the community members a chance to ask any questions or clarifying information from Dr. Harrison, because you don't get an opportunity to interact with her again. And then we'll move on to Chuck's report, because that is juicy and we need it.
That's
So
amazing.
sorry to interrupt, Dennis. I just want to give
No,
some
I
people
agree.
some time.
I'm with you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Anyone from the community?
I would definitely love to give space. I see, Yadira on here, Mary on here. If you live in the local community, Angela, I would love to hear any questions that you have. And I would just want to acknowledge that I could have given my space to you first. And you're living here, and I definitely want to make sure you get your questions in.
Thanks, Ian. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Angela Garcia. I'm a global resident. I've lived here for 50 years. I do have asthma. I did have cancer. And thank you so much for that presentation, and I appreciate it. I'm glad to see that there's finally attention being given to this neighborhood, and also to the environmental injustices that have happened to this community so much, so often, and I think will continue to happen. I've often said that once the people who live in this community have been pushed out with our $50 inhalers, with our cancer medication, to move in other neighborhoods, the people who come in, the colonizers who come in, will raise up the exact same things that we've talked about, but things will happen for them because they won't look like us in any way, shape, or form. And also, Dennis, I would like to say that anything and everything that's ever happened with the highway and with our communities has happened under Democrats, under Republicans, under both. It is not anyone any better than other. So I was offended that you said that, because under the past 4 years, under this regime, I don't call it an administration, I call it a regime, shit has not happened here. Ever. Nothing has happened here. I'm not going to apologize for my language. But this community has always been ignored, and I'm hoping that going forward with Yadira, Mary, Gail, Ian, and the CAG behind us, that we can finally begin to get something done for GES. And you're right, Ian, I live here off on 44th in Pennsylvania. 44th, we don't have sidewalks from Pearl up to Sherman. And we, as Global First, brought that up to the city 2 years ago in 2019, November of 2019, and we still don't have sidewalks. And of course, now they're saying it's because of the pandemic, even though we know that they're still working on the National Western and the highway. So thank you all very much. I appreciate you for allowing me to speak.
Appreciate you, Angela. Thank you so much for your contributions. And I agree. The sidewalk, we need sidewalks even more because of the pandemic. Public transportation is limited. All kinds of ways of getting around are limited. I couldn't agree with you even more on that. Are there any other community members that would like to speak or put some voice on this?
This is
Can
Mark.
you hear me?
Mark, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jill, I just had a question. Do you see environmental justice programs in, like, I guess, major environmental groups such as the Sierra Club push for more environmental for the EPA to look for more environmental justice measures? Or not just, I'm just using Sierra Club as an example, but any other type? That's my question.
So is the question whether those major environmental organizations are doing that or whether that's a good thing?
No, my question is, do they take environmental justice seriously? Like in the, I think it's very important that they do take it seriously. I'm just wondering if they have like a platform that they're actually pushing for changes in their own organization. Not just like, because I feel like they could affect the EPA. I don't know. This is my first meeting, so I might be off, but I'm just asking the question if they're actually pushing for environmental justice for these communities.
It's a good question, and it's something that Sierra Club and other mainstream major environmental organizations have been criticized for a long time, and rightly so, for not paying sufficient attention to the environmental needs of working class communities, communities of color, indigenous communities, and for not paying attention to environmental inequalities and rather devoting the majority of their attention to wilderness protection and other kinds of ends that that don't kind of benefit the communities that need the most attention. Now, over time, those organizations have given more lip service to environmental justice. They've had one or two environmental justice staff over time. Those weren't the organizations that I studied for my book, so I'm drawing here on research that others have done. There has been, that said, there has certainly been a proliferation of attention to environmental justice and lip service to environmental justice by those organizations in recent years. And the time is ripe to evaluate how much, whether they're putting their money where their mouth is in terms of really prioritizing environmental justice in their work. Certainly there's been a growth. How much growth, I can't say, but that's a really good empirical question.
Thank you.
I would like to just make a couple of comments. I think
Fran, 1 second. I think Mary had her hand up to go after Mark.
Right, go ahead, Mary.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can, Mary. Go ahead.
Okay, so Jill, I just wanted to know the research that you've done and everything. What can we do to get some justice in these neighborhoods? what is our next step to do something? Because nothing so far has worked that I can see. I know that we've all done a lot, and I've learned so much, and I've gained so much, and I just feel like, what can we do to get some justice?
Yeah, that's the question. That's exactly the question. And I'm sorry, Mary, I don't have an answer for you. I mean, I'm ready to kind of look at environmental regulatory agencies and give them advice about how they need to change, but I'm not ready to tell you all what you need to do. I'm not up on what you've been doing. And I don't, I'm just not ready to, I'm not at all equipped to be able to give you advice. And I say that with a heavy heart.
I thank you.
So Jill, thank you so much for being with us. And we could carry on for another hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. We do have another presentation, but would you come back? Would you continue the conversation with us? Maybe not at a meeting, but will you be available to us to talk and to maybe get some more of your wisdom and insights?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm not sure exactly how I can be of service to you, but I'm happy to have a conversation about that for sure.
Thank you. We need some help we need some help in how to communicate with our regulatory agencies. Some of them aren't really barely speaking to us, if at all. And we would like to extend an olive branch to them, and to have more communication and to have more access. So I think maybe that's something that you could speak to us about. So thank you very much, Jill.
Well, thank you all. And I hope you have a good evening, and I'll be with you in spirit in the good work that you're doing.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay for our next presentation if you like.
Oh, thank you. I must go eat some dinner, but
thank you.
All right.
Rachel.
That was very powerful, and I really do. There's a couple of things, and then we're gonna get into Chuck's presentation. The first thing is, if anyone in the community would like to purchase her book, I think we can figure out a way to make that cost-free. So anybody, I think that's important to offer that up to the community. So let's try to get that out. And I think that the more we can, and even if we can get some Spanish versions, that would be amazing. And so that would be great. And then the second thing, and the way that I'm thinking that we could actually have another conversation with her is through maybe like a small brown bag lunch kind of thing, where people it could be a little bit less formal and more casual, and folks can ask, a little bit more personal questions if they need to. Right. And with that, I have Chuck, who has what a doozy. Lots of great information, and I really appreciate all of the items that he called out, and I'll let him get to it.
Okay, just a second. Let me do a screen share because he has pictures of so here is Chuck Norris. For those of you who don't know, he's our technical advisor to the CAG, and he is very experienced in geology, hydrology, and management in applied and theoretical geosciences. And he has been with the CAG for several years now, and he has provided us with fantastic science information, analytical, makes recommendation, counsels us, helps us. And so Chuck, we're so grateful that you're with us. So by way of introduction, that's Chuck, and take it away, Chuck.
All right, hopefully people can hear me.
Oh, just 1 second. He's going to do his observation and recommendations to the CAG on City and County of Denver's report to the EPA on technical memorandums on scoping the revised remedial investigation for Vasquez Boulevard Superfund Site Revision 1. This letter report has been prepared by Stantec Consulting Services on behalf of the City and County of Denver to summarize the scope of additional work recommended at OU2, portion of Vasquez Boulevard at Interstate 70, Superfund Site for completion of the remedial investigation, which is very important. So there, your first slide is up on the screen, Chuck.
All right, can people hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Was there a nope?
Pardon?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move along pretty quickly here. I won't pretend that I think you've all read this or digested it, because I know I only got it done on the 14th. But if we're going to have any questions, I need to kind of move through it. The technical memorandum is in a way not a very significant document in terms of content specifically. It's a very important document, though, because it's laying out what City and County of Denver would like to be the scope of work for a revised remedial investigation that they've been told is needed for operable Unit 2, OU2. They did a remedial investigation about a dozen years ago now, and the subsequent documents, the feasibility study and the various risk analyses to get toward a record decision that would allow them to do what they wanted to do on the site and get it declared finished and delisted like was done with OU1. Over the course of the years, it has become obvious that that original remedial investigation wasn't adequate. There were gaps in it, and it needed revisions. And there's been, I infer from conversations I've heard among the agencies, there's been some differences of opinion as to whether the original one was adequate as Denver proposed it, but there have been changes. There's been new data. It has been decided that the sediments in City and County of Denver's municipal dump that they put onto the site after they mined out and distributed some of the wastes that were left behind by the smelter when it shut down, that was in fact something that needed to be addressed. And so they're having to do a revision to their remedial investigation from 2009, and the scope of work for that new remedial investigation is being laid out or outlined in this technical memorandum. So it's a foresight of really where City and County and Denver wants to end up. It came to us lately. We didn't get a chance. I didn't get a chance to see this until the middle of, or about a third of the way through December. So this is taken a bit of effort to put this together. I outlined three general categories of issues that I thought needed to be addressed, discussed. One were what I called systemic issues. Then there were some specific issues related to specific proposals that City and County of Denver's consultant is recommending on their behalf. And then there are a couple that I just said they're kind of miscellaneous, but they're important either because what was said about them or what wasn't said about them. The systemic things are they're not philosophical, but they're broad brush. They're not specific details that need to be addressed, but the overall tone and the overall objective of what city and county would like to do in way of modification of its remedial investigation, I think misses the mark of what operating meaningfully under the Superfund program needs to reflect. And this technical memorandum doesn't help it address that. It in fact, these seem to be systemic problems that existed in the remedial investigation and subsequent documents in 2009. And rather than correct those issues, which I feel led to the inadequacy of the first RI, this document seems to be that City and County of Denver wants to perpetuate those inadequacies. One of them is a definition for OU2 and a appreciation or implementation of what a remedial investigation is supposed to be. It to me is rather dramatic, the difference between the definitions of OU1 and OU3, which are operable units that are the responsibility of the EPA, because there are no PRPs for those, so the agency itself is taking the lead on those and doing them under the Superfund program, as opposed to OU2, where City and County of Denver is certainly the dominant PRP, and it is also the responsible agency for doing the work on OU2. In the case of OU1 and OU3, there are very clear definitions that the EPA provided that tells somebody who's looking through the documents unambiguously what is and is not in those operable units. Now, you can argue whether or not those definitions are adequate definitions or what would be most appropriate for those units, but it's not a squishy, soft target in terms of discussing it. I think this technical memorandum, were there a more useful working definition of OU2, would make it easier to actually do what needs to be done to produce a meaningful remedial investigation. The first figure that I have is the Superfund site. You've seen versions of it, but this is a picture of the Superfund site in 2001. And that is before the original RI was done. The OU2 that's kind of in the north central portion, and I don't know if somebody could run a mouse over it, but it's on the east side of the river, just south of I-70. That's the area that was drawn as this is OU2. And at the time that the Superfund site was brought into existence, the understanding that people had based upon the data available to them is, and this came largely from work at the Globe site, is these smelters had a lot of metal-bearing materials, both as products and as byproducts and as wastes, that were kind of centralized on the properties where the smelters operated. And sometimes if there was a gravel pit that a smelter was putting waste into, you might have a localization of the waste in addition to the smelter property itself. If some chemical process was being done in a pit that generated contamination that went into the ground and contaminated groundwater, there might be something in addition to what went on at the smelter. But it was pretty centric to the location of the smelters, with the exception of dust from the stacks. The smelters, in order to do their work, had tall stacks that created almost hurricane force winds lifting the heat up that kept the oxygen coming into the blast furnaces. And that carried a lot of both dust up with it and metals that were vaporized and condensed at the top of the stack and came out as particles. And that broadcast itself over large areas, depending on which way the wind went. So based on the Globe smelter, the definition for OU2 was the sites of two, the Argo smelter and the Omaha Grant smelter, and the sites they were built on. And then there was the very large, and that was respectively OU3 and OU2. And then the very large area that was OU1 that got discovered, if you will, as a spin-off of the Globe, where they were trying to find out where did the air disposited contaminants, what was their aerial extent. And the further they went out into from Globeville into the Elyria-Swansea area, they kept finding the contaminants out there. But the original conception of what it was localized contamination at the smelters and air deposited sediments that were out in the neighborhoods and across town. By the time 2001 got there, it was becoming obvious there was a problem in that understanding, and that was during the development of OU1 and the early remediation or investigations at OU2. And I'll come back to that, but that's how OU2 was originally drawn, and that's why it's the shape and position it is on that first diagram I've got from the Superfund map of 2001. In 2009, 2008-9, when the RI was done, that was still the outline of OU2, and that was still used for OU2, but it became, now it was explicitly stated it's going to be only on site of OU2. Even though some of the waste deposits and fill areas extend, and even in 2008 it was known they extended across that barrier. There were not different conditions on either side. It was taken by City and County of Denver that OU2 cannot be anything except what's right there on inside that yellow line, even though there was no hard reason why the yellow line was where it was. Now, if you look at the City and County of Denver depiction of OU2 at the 2001 map or any of the 2008 maps, you'll see that there's a kind of a corner of it that goes out and virtually goes all the way across the South Platte River in the southwest corner of it. The boundary was redefined without comment, as far as I can see, for this technical memorandum. And if you look at the second map, it is the technical memorandum's map of OU2.
Chuck, are we changing, are we moving on to the next slide?
Yes, the next slide. You will notice that that square corner that went out and virtually across the river has now been pulled back in, running up just inside the edge of the river on the side of Globeville Park there. There's no real reason why it does that, but to the extent that City and County of Denver wants to consider only what's on the site, that is putting a boundary on the site that may impact what ultimately is argued does and doesn't count for being OU2 definition. So it changes its boundary and it changes its description, seemingly to coincide with what City and County of Denver would like. I think there needs to be a hard definition for OU2. I think that definition should be directly analogous to EPA's definition for OU3. And I propose that it be something very similar to OU2 is the area where the former Omaha and Grat smelter operated and includes all environmental media impacted by releases of hazardous substances, including heavy metals, from that smelter and from subsequent activity on that area. That part is different than OU3, and that's because of the municipal dump that City and County of Denver operated there during the 30s and 40s. Coincident with that, though, is my concern with the other systematic problem, which is the way the consultant to City and County of Denver is choosing to talk about conceptual site models. What I described to you earlier was the original conceptual site model for the Superfund site. Two smelter areas and their surrounding areas where they waste from them contaminated other media outside the footprints of the smelters, and the airfall that put stuff in people's yards.
Chuck, are we on slide 3 now?
That was what I was going to say. And if you go to slide 3, that's an example of the 2001 conceptual site model. It is not for OU2. And the way these things operate is what went on, what of those activities created contaminants, where did those contaminants end up, and to where they are now, and what are the environmental impacts that are continuing impacts from where they were, or are impacts due to that transport of the materials, but have been modified or can be cleaned up. And so each time you've got a square, that's something we know, and the arrows lead you through a matrix of based on what we know, this is what we can anticipate. And then you go out and you collect data, and if that data fits your conceptual model, then you keep building on it. But it is, the original conceptual model is supposed to be and is meaningful only if it is modified. It is a moving target, a evolving understanding. And City and County of Denver's consultant is basically still accepting this 2001 understanding of the site, with the caveat that it does now acknowledge a different suite of contaminants and different transport mechanisms that may be of concern related to those, but the overall site is still being developed, and the RI is still looking at working from a 20-year-old Superfund-wide site conceptual model. And when the consultant's discussion talks about a conceptual site model, on this diagram, it is just talking about the portion of it that constitutes the right-hand column of this diagram. There is no revision backward and updating of the original 1990s belief of what it was they were looking at. And the real problem with that for this site, for Elyria Swansea, for the whole Superfund site, is that the work that was done on OU1 with the shallow contaminants that were supposed to be reflective of skyfall is that the RI for OU1 concluded that whatever is the purpose or whatever caused that contamination in people's backyards, that's basically the only place that it was looked at. But whatever caused that contamination was not skyfall from smelter stacks. Something else caused that damage scattered all over OU1. OU1 did not go back and try and understand what caused that contamination, but there is a lot of evidence that the Omaha and Grant smelter is a likely source of a lot of that contamination, because it was operating during the time period that Elyria Swansea was being infilled with sediment in the Mount Clair Creek Basin from wherever fill could come in order to get it up out of the water that was dammed up by the railroads. So there should be a revisitation of a site conceptual model for OU2 to see if it in fact is the cause of the widespread contamination in the area that was investigated only from a standpoint of dust falling from the sky. Dust falling from the sky and herbicides or pesticides do not account for the contamination that was investigated in OU1, and nothing but the top soils was investigated in OU1 as part of the Superfund site. So the conceptual model and the definition of OU1 and the actual scope of what an RI is supposed to accomplish are the systemic problems. The specific problems with what was proposed through its consultant by City and County of Denver are discussed in pretty specific detail. There are groundwater monitoring wells that are being proposed. It's not clear exactly how and where those are going to accomplish anything. the monitoring wells are being going to have water collected only at the water table. That's an important place to collect the data, but water in that shallow aquifer flows in 3 dimensions. It gets precipitation recharge at the surface of the aquifer at the water table, but then that water goes down and through the sediments and moves in 3 dimensions. The technical memorandum does not discuss the ramifications of that or justify why sampling at the water table is only enough. And that applies to both the groundwater sampling as well as the measurements of the height of the water table, so that you're actually getting a good view of both flow and composition of the water and how it's moving through the natural sediments as well as through the wastes in the municipal dump.
Excuse me just a second. I think I would like to say that we would like to continue on until the conclusion of your presentation, that it is almost 7:30, but I feel that this is very important, and people who would like to stay on, please do beyond 7:30. We want to hear what Chuck has to say. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I'll be very quick about that, but
don't be quick, be thorough.
well, we've got a problem because I think we probably should concede the fact that this needs to be moved to the next meeting, because I'm going to be cutting so many corners off what my opinions are, and then there's going to be no time for meaningful questions and answering. And this is to be rammed through this fast at the end.
I agree.
I would recommend this be deferred and finished up at the festival.
Chuck, weren't you the one who told me that geologists don't like to speak more than 15 minutes at a time?
I said if you give them more than 15 minutes, you have to give them 2 hours.
So this is fascinating, and we did run over on our previous speaker, and I take responsibility for being a bad scheduler, but we would like to have your presentation in full. And so do you want to continue on for a bit, or would you like to just reserve the rest of your presentation for our next meeting?
No, I'm not going to rush through anymore. I think it needs to go to the next meeting.
All right. So thank you. And thank you so much for being with the CAG.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Great report.
So I would just like to conclude our meeting with an announcement. Our next meeting is going to be on February 16th. We're having the Endocrine Society. And I think what we'll do is we'll have Chuck do his presentation first. And then for the first hour, and then the second hour would be the Endocrine Society. So yes. I would like to end our meeting with a brief, a 2-minute video of what an endocrine disruptor is. And these are a lot of the toxins that have plagued our community.
Bridget, you might want to just put it in the chat, and then people can take it and then watch it. They can go and watch it and have it ready.
You know what? I don't know if I can.
The link.
Right.
Copy and paste the link into there. And
I don't have, this is an M4. It only is 2 minutes.
If you've been listening to the news at all, you've probably heard about the dangerous chemicals that are called endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. Inside our bodies is a network of glands and organs called the endocrine system that produce, store, and secrete hormones. Normally, the hormones go from the gland or organ to the other organs and fit right into specific receptors expressed in cells. Kind of like how a key goes into a lock. But when EDCs get into the body, they can mimic the shape of the hormone, and they go into the receptor instead. They can trick the body into thinking they are a hormone or block the hormone from fitting into its receptor. Fooling a cell in this way can trigger abnormal processes in the body. This can wreak havoc on the entire endocrine system and may lead to severe health consequences. EDCs have been linked to human health issues related to sperm quality, fertility, abnormalities in sex organs, endometriosis, early puberty, nervous system function, immune function, cancers, breathing problems, metabolic issues, obesity, heart health, growth, neurological, and learning disabilities, and more, because hormones regulate nearly every process in the body. What's worrisome is that exposure to EDCs can happen anywhere and come from the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the water we drink, and through the skin. Some EDCs even transfer from mothers to fetuses and infants. They can be found in industrial chemicals that leach into soil and groundwater and then make their way into the food chain and build up in fish, animals, and people. Consumer products such as plastics, household chemicals, fabrics treated with flame retardants, cosmetics, lotions, products with fragrance, and antibacterial soaps, pesticides, fungicides, or industrial chemicals in the workplace. The best way to avoid exposure is to check labels and avoid products containing known EDCs. Research on EDCs is growing, so watch for new information on products to help your family's health. Contact your elected officials and tell them to pass the personal.
Okay.
Everyone. And I wanted to say that we will be more intentional about giving more space to the community and giving more community voices in here. No one's voice should be rushed. So we want to make sure that our experts get heard, our community gets heard. So we'll be better about planning. And I appreciate everybody hanging out tonight, hanging with us. With that, I guess that we'll adjourn. Do we have parliamentarian? Do we have to do something to get out of here?
Well, I just hope things start changing. If you're more optimistic than I am, Rachel. Good luck. Bridget, you never did take that vote, but I think everybody, by my raising it, is probably for the.
You can take it by email.
Yeah, you can take it by email. Okay, we'll see everybody later. Let's hope things get better.
Thank you all for coming.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.